Hi everyone, Dr. Amna Husain here, board certified pediatrician, board certified lactation consultant, mom to two. This is a popularly requested video on travel tips for kids. Okay everyone, so for the sake of this video, we're not going to touch a ton on traveling in a pandemic. There are so many guides and tips out there, including a blog post, which I've done in the past, and many YouTube shorts. I will link one of my older videos on travel tips with kids, but for the purpose of this video, I want to try to create something outside of the pandemic, more evergreen content, something that you can always come back and visit if you're traveling, hopefully 20 years from now with kids, and we don't have to worry about a pandemic. So at this point, I'm a mom to a 4.5-year-old and an almost 1-year-old. We have traveled quite a bit, international as well as national. We've done flights, we've done car trips, maybe occasional boat excursions for a day or so, but I'm pretty experienced at knowing how to navigate travel situations, and I'm going to share with you some of my top tips. The first tip, bring your expectations low. Bring them low from a vacation to a trip. Okay? Doesn't mean that it's not going to be enjoyable. I want you to understand that, but you may not be able to do all the things you once planned to do. It doesn't mean you can't travel at all with kids, but this might mean that it's not necessarily as relaxing as it once used to be, depending on the age of your children. Now, if your children are school-age children who can stay up late at night or easy to, take to restaurants, all of those good things, perfect. But if you're still in the age that I am, that you have to haul around car seats, which we'll hit more on later, if you're thinking about packing food, packing all changes of outfits, diapers, etc., it's still fun, but it may not feel like a vacation. It might feel like a trip. And I say that because there's a lot to remember. So my second tip is try to come up with a strategy on how to remember those things. So something that's worked really well for me is when Asia was 9 months old, we went on our first international trip to Aruba. And this was actually, I think, our first plane flight with her as well. And I wrote out a huge long list and I took a picture of it. And I actually saved that picture on my phone, and it's a favorite, so I won't delete it, even though it looks, I'll go back later and be like, what's this list that I took a picture of? I won't delete it because I remember that it's my travel list. And obviously things have changed as time's gone on because, she's not 1, she became 3 and wasn't wearing as many diapers, etc. But it was a nice structure to sort of remember how many outfits, socks, her pack and play that we take to sleep with, maybe her baby monitor, a few snacks, things like that. And so it was a nice structure for me to even go through and be like, oh yeah, we don't take puffs anymore, but let me pack Scooby snacks or something like that she really likes. And so I feel like that structure has really helped me, especially with baby number 2, because we are back in that phase of needing diapers, needing puffs, needing all types of different changes of outfits. And it's nice to be able to go back and visit a packing list for a baby. All right, my third tip kind of ties into my second tip, because where you're going and who you're staying with will determine what your packing list will look like. Let me give you an example. If I travel to my parents' house, I know they have a crib, I know they have bottles, I know that I can tell my mom to buy a few snacks and have them there. But if I'm traveling to a hotel, for example, or an Airbnb, we need to take a pack and play. We need to basically start from scratch. I need to basically envision, especially if we're going to a hotel, that I have nothing with me there. I might need to bring extra food, extra snacks, pack bottles, make sure I pack a brush to clean a bottle with. All of these items that might be very important, that might not matter as much if you're staying with family or staying with friends who have a baby that would really understand and have those items there for you. Tip 4 is actually kind of important because it depends on which way you're traveling. First, let's talk about if you're traveling by car, because you might need to think about a few items. You might need to actually stop more frequently than you're used to, because some children might need to stop to get a diaper change. You might need to stop to feed the baby. You might need to actually stop because they're getting car sick. Now, what are things you can do to alleviate car sickness? I say pack a few light snacks to sort of alleviate hunger. You also don't want them to eat too much because that can actually also make the car sickness worse. Distraction always works wonders, right? So stickers, songs, toys, sometimes screens can actually make it worse. And on that note, sometimes I find that staring at things further away can actually be better for kids. This would not be a case to switch your child from rear facing to forward facing early if they are having car sickness. Obviously, we know rear facing in a car seat is much safer, but when it comes to being car sick, try to have them focus on something a little further away. You might need to sit back there in the back with your child if that's necessary, but those are all some tips. And of course, make sure you talk to your pediatrician. You might actually need to stop the car, allow your child to walk around, get some fresh air before you load back into the car. So again, this goes back to tip 1, go from a vacation back down to a trip. So it won't be exactly the trip you once used to envision before you had children, but that doesn't mean that you can't plan appropriately and just sort of take those stops into account. And remember that this is not forever. This is just a certain moment in your life, and this is not in any ways meant to scare you or make you panic or worry about traveling with kids. Just remember, try to plan, strategize ahead of time, and take that into account. All right, now if you're planning on traveling by plane, it's really important to recognize that traveling by car seat is the safest way. So you should have an FAA approved car seat, and you can actually buy a seat and take this on the flight. For many parents, this is actually something they prefer. They have their hands free, they have their own space, the child has their own space, and you might actually find that your child sleeps better on the flight. For others, I do recognize that you do have to budget up to buy that seat, and I acknowledge that that might not be the case for everybody, but generally that is the safest recommendation. Now, going on to my personally tried and true tips when it comes to traveling by plane, because that's primarily our method of travel. I will make a note here when it comes to COVID, because when you're traveling on the road, it's a lot easier to hopefully get by safer in a pandemic because you're in your own car. If you stop at a rest stop or in a crowded indoor setting, you wear a mask. On a flight, now that the airline mask mandates have been removed, it's a little trickier. If you have a child that's older than 2, do your best to try to encourage them to keep a mask on. I know this is tough because snacks are one of the only ways I can keep my child entertained. And when they're snacking, their mask is down. So what I try to do is not have them take off their mask when snacks are passed around if possible, because more people will have their mask off. You can also increase the vent flow of air when you are waiting on the tarmac. That's an option. Actually, when the airplane is flying, the circulation is actually quite good on the plane. But if you're waiting on the tarmac or the plane is taxiing, you could try to increase ventilation that way, and hopefully that's the time that you can really be diligent that the mask is being worn. Try to also upgrade to wearing a high quality N95 mask or a KF94 mask. There's some really great pediatric options. I have linked a few in my Amazon shop that I use for my own kids. Sometimes I even use them for my own face because they fit so well, but that's an option as well. For your children who are under 2, try to remember you can only control what you can control. I try to keep my own little one close to me. So if we're in the airport and everybody's really gathered around the gate, I try to stand off to the side with her so that, I'm not really within 6 feet of another person, at least trying to keep 3 feet distance. Usually I wear my baby so that I have my hands free, especially during travel. And I actually choose to wear her in a carrier that faces me, a structured carrier. So that way she's really in my respiratory bubble and I'm wearing a mask as well. It's not ideal. It's the best I can do, and we do try to travel at times when the flights are not super booked, so either early morning, and usually I do recommend you try to travel in the mornings with kids. So that's one of the tips when it comes to traveling with kids. Either try to travel early morning because less likely to have delayed flights, they're not as packed. Usually, if the child does misbehave, you kind of have the whole day once you've landed at your destination to kind of catch up on sleep. Speaking of, with the empty flights, see if after everybody's boarded, you can ask one of the flight attendants if you can switch seats where you can have a little bit more room as well. That's always an option, especially if you haven't already bought a seat for the infant. Now, another thing to remember is potentially trying to travel during their nap times. This can be a hit or miss. So there have been times there's been a total miss for me, and there have been times where it's been such a hit and I've been able to get both kids asleep because they're exhausted, and as soon as the plane really starts, that humming engine and the gentle lull of movement really helps them fall asleep. I have my own little quirks, so for the baby I can really stroke her forehead, her what we call the glabellar region, and really get her to go to sleep. For Asia, it's usually stroking her hair and singing Disney songs in her ear. Eventually, I see her eyes start to droop and she goes to sleep. those are my 2 tips for both kids, but your kids can be totally different. So it might be completely up to you. It's very difficult, I will say, to travel with 2 young kids and 1 parent. So I haven't done that yet. I've always been able to travel with my husband, who's been able to help out if needed with one of the kids. So one thing we didn't get a chance to talk about is takeoff and landing. So my tips are really trying to get a sucking motion. So if you have the baby, you can try nursing them, bottle feeding them, offering a pacifier. But your older kids, what are you gonna do? Well, usually it's just any motion of the jaw. So I usually try to work on providing some kind of crunchy snack. Usually it's like, used to be at one time apple slices cut really thinly for Asia, and I used to eat them as well. So you're getting the jaw moving. Gummy snacks is a really good one because again, you get the jaw moving. Sips of water because you are working on that sucking motion. So we use a thermos water bottle with a straw, and that really also helps. So usually sometimes I am just like giving her puffs or crackers or snacks and then shooting it down with water as well. Another thing that you can use for your older child is a lollipop. So those little dum-dum lollipops, you know, you can even use it as an incentive. So don't tell your dentists I said this, but if they're doing really well and they're very calm for you at the gate, you can say, okay, you got on the plane, now it's time for your lollipop. Just remember, you want to try to time these well, because you know, and I know, that sometimes you can be sitting there on that plane and it'll be 20 minutes before we start to even take off. So you might need to bring a few more snacks or a few more lollipops than normal. Other things that you might want to pack are some cheap toys. So I started doing this really early on when Asia was a baby, that I would go to the dollar store and just pick up some cheap toys. They look new to them. If they break, if they fall, I don't care. They're very cheap, but they look new. And once they get tired of one, you pull out the other one. Once they get tired of that, you pull out the other one. So that's a really great tip as well. Okay, my last one is trying to stay hydrated. This is important not just for the child, but also for you. So don't be like me and purposely dehydrate yourself on the day of travel, because you will end up feeling terrible. You will have low energy. You will likely get a migraine. And I know that we parents want to do this because it's one less thing for us to have to worry about taking our kids to the bathroom. But in the event that you need to, you can pass the baby to the air steward or stewardess and go to the bathroom if you need to. But I have been there in that position before, where I'm more focused on the baby or the child feeling comfortable than myself. And it ends up catching up to me. And I actually just don't feel like I have very good energy to take care of me or the child once we're landing. So make sure you're staying hydrated. And on that note, make sure that you bring a change of clothes for the baby and for yourself potentially. This is really important, because what if your baby has a diaper blowout on the flight? You might have a change of clothes for the baby, but sometimes you might have a poop explosion and the child was sitting on your lap, and then your pants are dirty as well, or they throw up and they throw up on your clothes. So make sure you maybe have like a change of pants or a change of shirt, something like that. Layering is always helpful on a flight, so that you can really just get rid of those filthy clothes when you need to, if an accident does happen. So those are all my tips. This was chock full of things for if you're traveling by car, if you're traveling by plane, all the things that I've learned along the way. If you have tips, please leave them in the comments, because I could always use them. If you find this video helpful, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe. I will see you next week. Bye.